So change your behavior, change your life. What does that mean? All of us are going through life. We're interacting with humans. We're acting with people at home, at work, walking down the street, driving down the road. And we're ending up getting some results that are directly tied to those behaviors and to the people we're interacting with. The question I want you to think about right now for the next 10 or 15 minutes is, what results are you currently getting in your life that you wish could be better? Or are there people in your life that as you're working with and you're interacting with, maybe that are really important to you in your life, that the relationship isn't just right where it needs to be? You wish it could be just a little bit better. We're excited to be able to share with you today a tool, a model that's helped me. It's blessed my life, completely helped me change some of those most important relationships and begin to get the results that I've wanted to get, I now get, because I just understand this simple model and how it works. And what do I need to do to change? So as we begin this process, I want to introduce you to this model. It's called the Believe, Behave, Become model. It's pretty complicated. It's 3 steps. I want to explain to you how the model works, the process of the model, and then how do we use the model to actually change those results that we want to improve in our lives. So as you can see over here, we have the model. Starts up here at the believe. We move from believe down to behave and behave to become. So let me just walk through an example of what that looks like. Let's say, and this is not true, but let's just say that I believe my wife's a nag. That's a belief system. My wife is just a nag, and she just is never ever lets up on me. And so my belief system that I've developed is she's just a nag. Now she's not. She's the sweetest person in the world. I want to make sure we're clear about that. Because if she watches this video, I'm going to be in trouble. So let's say she is. That's my belief system. So how do I behave now when I'm around her? I'm a little more guarded. I'm a little protected. I'm a little more on call. Like, okay, what's she going to nag me about now? And I behave in certain ways that I basically separate myself from her. And then what kind of results do I get? Who do I become? I become a husband that's more separated, that's disengaged, because who wants to be around a nag, right? And by doing that, then she ends up wanting to be more engaged with me, and then kind of builds my whole belief system, because now she's like coming after me. It's because I'm now trying to go away. She's trying to come after me. And I'm like, see, she is a nag. She can't even leave me alone, right? That is one possibility. But the reality is, if this just comes down to, now what part of this do I own? And so now I have this relationship I want to improve. And I know this understanding of this model. And I actually want to share with you probably a more powerful model that's true to illustrate how this plays out. But just to know that your belief systems right now, whatever they are what they are. You've come to this point in time, and up to this point in time, and now there's nothing you can do about that. You own them. They're here. They're now. And those belief systems are turning into your behaviors on a regular basis. Sometimes you either say, oh, I don't want to do that, or I don't want to behave that way. But we do, because they just naturally happen. And it's those behaviors that are now producing who you've become. Now, the good news is that starting today, moving forward, you can do everything you want about that. You can actually change who you've become. So let's talk about how we do that. So the first step of this is really to determine what results are you currently getting in your life. And we know that there's some results that you're happy about. We know they exist. But then we also know, if I'm looking at just the key relationships in my life, there's some of those relationships that I'm not happy with. And so what do I need to do to change those results that I'm getting? Well, how the model works is you work backwards through this model. I start with the result that I'm not happy with. And let me give you an example of a result that I wasn't happy with some almost 30 years ago. There's a result where I would come home, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, my wife shared with me one day, she says, your children are afraid of you. And sometimes I'm even afraid of you. So let me just pause here for a second. So here's a result that I'm getting in my life. In those most important relationships, my wife and my children, there was this element of fear. Now, I don't know why they feared me. I didn't know that I was doing anything that would cause that. But it came to my knowledge. I became self-aware of this. She helped me to do this. And so now I have to go through this model and use this model to help me to begin to change. So the very first thing I do is I ask myself the question, why? And that's what I want you to do. Why is it that they feared me? So I started asking questions. So why is it that you fear me? Why is it that you're afraid of me? And they gave me a list. I was so surprised. They actually gave me a list. They said, well, Dad, you yell. And I'm like, I don't yell. In my mind, I wasn't yelling, but in their mind, in their lives, I was yelling. So I had to accept that. Okay, I yelled. Second thing they said I did was I got big. Now, what does that look like? Well, they say, my wife would describe this probably better, and she's just this tiny little person. Imagine my 5'1" wife and then all of these little children, and I got big for them. Now, getting big to them was I would usually stand up straighter, my chest would kind of come out, my shoulders would go back. I would, kind of get on my toes a little bit. Now it's 200 and some odd pounds, right? So imagine if you're a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old and this big guy stands up and starts getting, and then add on top of getting big, I got loud, right? Now I'm starting to recognize where fear might come from, right? Now I didn't do anything with that other than it was just this presence, so I'd get big, right? I'd get big, I'd yell, I'd get intense. Those are all the kind of things that they described to me. So over here, I wrote these down, right? I got big, I'd yell, I'd get intense. So now I list these behaviors. And now the third thing that I would do now is ask myself the question, well, why is it that I would get big? Why is it that I would yell, right? Why is it that I would get intense? So that's the second phase of this. Ask myself why. Now I want to get up to, because ultimately, how many times have you tried to change something in your life and you only focused on the behavior? How'd that work for you? I know I've tried it hundreds of times over my life, right? I just focused on the behavior. I'm just going to stop doing this, or I'm going to start doing this because I'm not happy with some results, so I'm going to stop doing this. I actually started this process doing that. Oh, I yell. Okay, so I'm going to stop yelling. It lasted like 15 seconds. Sometimes I could get through a day and not yell. But then sure enough, something would happen and this little thing in my brain would go off and I would get big and I'd yell, even though I knew it was wrong and I knew it was damaging those relationships. So when you only focus on behavior, you're only going to end up getting short-term results. It won't last because there's something bigger going on. There's something going on in my belief system that is driving ultimately the behaviors. Years ago when I was doing some basketball training, I was coaching some basketball. And I couldn't understand, what was happening with these kids on the floor. I'd get them into practice and I would teach them how to shoot the shots, and they would shoot the shots and they would start making them in practice because, to shoot a shot, there's a specific way, elbows in, hand back, follow through, right? 3 key elements. And in practice, they would do that. They do it over and over and over again. And then we get into a game and what would happen? As soon as we get in the game, they're in the heat of the game, they just start throwing the ball at the basket. I'm like, are you kidding me? We went over this in practice. You could do it in the short term. While we're in practice, you could do it. Why can't you do it in a game? Because they didn't do it long enough to develop what the memory of how to shoot a basket. It was up in their heads. Their methodology was, I'm successful at playing basketball by throwing the basket. Coach was teaching us something different. It's the same thing for us in our lives. If we want to get better at whatever it is, we've got to find out what's going on in our head, in our belief systems. So I got up here into my belief system and said, well, what's going on in my belief system that I think that it's even appropriate to be able to get big, get loud, get intense with a 4-year-old? I mean, honestly, think about that as an adult. What could possibly justify yelling and getting big and intense at a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, or my spouse? What could possibly justify that? And I had to really spend some time and go through that. And as I did, I started to analyze, and I actually came up with my belief system. That was my belief system. I'm the dad. Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. I think that was important for me to recognize. It wasn't just, oh, I'm the dad. It was, I'm the dad, right? And since I'm the dad and you're the child, if you don't do what I say, then my job is to get you to learn and understand. And the way that I believe that I could do that is by getting big and loud and showing you how important I am as compared to how insignificant you are. Now, I know that sounds pretty, but that's where I was. And that was the reality. So until I literally connected with that reality of what was happening, that my belief system was saying, I'm the dad. You are insignificant as a child, or even in case my wife wasn't as significant as I was. And so I had the right to behave the way I behaved. Now, I had a choice. I now know that belief system was driving those behaviors that was getting me those results. I didn't want them anymore. I wanted to have better results. I wanted to have a great relationship with my family. And so what did I need to do? I needed to create a new belief system. Probably you've seen things like this, you've heard about things like this, but this really does work. And so what I did was I created a new belief system. I sat down, well, what kind of dad, what kind of husband do I want to be? And I came up with some critical words. I want to be a dad that's kind. I want to be a dad that's loving. But I also want to be a dad that holds people accountable. That was important to me. So I write that down. That's my new belief system. I'm a dad that's kind and loving and holds people accountable. So now how do I start living that out, right? How do I start behaving in ways like that? Well, like my kids in the basketball game, I'm now in the game of life, right? I'm in this game of home and my family. And so I'm not even recognizing. You throw me into the game of home, and right off the bat, I revert back to those same behaviors that I'm normally used to doing. So to be able to help me, I needed to involve them in coaching me and helping me recognize when I was throwing the ball as compared to when I was shooting the ball, or when I was being kind or when I wasn't being kind. Now, if you want to really get good in relationships with your children, ask them to be your coaches. They love it. They loved being part of my process of changing who I was. Because as I was working on changing who I wasn't changing who they were. So they loved helping me. And it was things like this. Something would happen. I would immediately start to kind of get big. I start to get loud. And they would go, you know, Dad, you're not following your belief system. You're not being very kind right now, or you're not being very nice right now. And I would stop and I'd pause. I'm like, oh, you know what? You're right. And many times I would say, you know what? You're absolutely right. Let's just stop right here. Let me go. Let me spend some time, because when I come back, because we're going to need to still have an accountability conversation about what happened. But let me come back and I can have it with you in a better way. Can we do that? And they're like, yeah. So I'd go off, and it might be later in the afternoon or might be the next day. We can come back and have a very kind and very loving, but an accountable conversation. So time over time, my wife being a great coach, my kids being a great coach, I was able to develop the new behaviors. I could be loving, and as I did, I was able to improve those results. I can tell you, it didn't happen overnight. It happened little bit by little bit, but as it happened, it became to be more part of who I was. My belief system became my new belief system, which then ultimately now just drives those behaviors naturally. I don't have to fight with it anymore. Now, am I perfect? No. But I can tell you almost instantaneously now, I know the moment I'm not being kind. I don't have to have anybody tell me that. And I could then begin to make a choice at that point in time to really be deliberate about being more kind. If you have stories like that of how you've been able to change and improve your life, I'd love to hear them. So click below in the comment section below and let me hear some of your great stories. We'd like to share some of those maybe as we move forward in some of the other videos that we're going to create. But if you don't have any of those stories, you can begin today and write your own new story by using this simple model of believe, behave, become, and change your life today and the relationships of those around you. So as you begin your journey on change, like I did, and how to improve your behaviors, there's so many things that we can talk about, so many things that influence this model. One of the things that I've spent pretty much my life's work on is understanding this idea of beginning at the self-awareness phase, of really understanding who I am first. I think that's what helped me to understand how to begin to change. One of the ways we'd like to help you is to help you understand yourself by clicking on the free assessment below. It's a 4 lenses assessment, and that assessment can help you begin to understand why you behave the way you behave and how you can begin to change and improve. And as you move forward in changing and taking that assessment and joining us on future videos, you'll be joining us on helping us put the human back into humanity.